Hey y'all, I'm in the greenhouse. It is a windy and kind of overcast day, but I figured I would come out and tell you guys a little bit about the flowers that I've got started in the greenhouse right now, what I'm growing, a little bit about why I'm growing what I'm growing, and a couple of the tools and other little things I've got in the greenhouse that are helping me grow right now. So the wind is really strong. You hear the plastic on the greenhouse rattling a little bit. I'm just gonna try to talk over that. So let's get started. The first thing I'm going to show you guys are the seedlings that I have started. So what I'm working on right now is growing cool season flowers. These are things that can be sown in the fall or over winter with a little bit of protection so that you have blooms in early spring. And so that's what I'm aiming for. I've never done this before, so I'm definitely not advising anyone as an expert. I'm just going to be sharing my experience with you guys. So I've got some cool season stuff started right now, and I'll show you what that's looking like so far. Okay, here is one of my first flats of transplants that I started back in November. And right here, I've got Cresspedia, I've got some Rudbeckia, and some cats. I am trying to get a good mix of foliage and flowers. I am growing flowers to sell at market and for individual sales. My sister and I might be doing some pop-ups here and there this summer, so that's why I'm growing flowers. I've also got down here some silver dollar eucalyptus started, and what you see is a granular fertilizer. I've heard it recommended to use a liquid fertilizer, and I'm not opposed to that. I just had some organic granular fertilizer on hand already, so I'm just working with what I've got right now. Little bit of algae growth right here. So this is really moist. I did have the greenhouse closed up for a few days when the temps dropped down and it was super rainy, so that shouldn't be a huge problem. But I've got eucalyptus as a filler. Sorry, I got sidetracked. Feverfew for flowers, and I've got some bupleurum as a filler also. I've heard that you want to make sure you have a good balance of flower and foliage for your bouquets. So I'm trying to achieve that. Let's see. All right, on this side, I've got some forget-me-not started, firmament and rose in the back, and more bupleurum here in the middle. I am succession sowing, and so this is my first succession. I will show you guys what I've got in the seed trays over here. So over here is my second succession of foliage and flowers, and if you're not familiar with succession planting, all that is planting continuously on a schedule. So you might say every 2 weeks or every week or every month, depending on what your goals are. So I have this bottom water tray on top of a seed starting tray and a heat mat. This is my first year germinating with a heat mat and trying out this method. I usually don't have terrible germination, but having this heat mat should provide more even germination across the board. So instead of a plant here and a plant there, I should have them all coming up around the same time. And then this was just to keep in some humidity, and you can see the sides of that are wet, so it's doing what it's supposed to do. And here's a look at some of the little seedlings I've got started. So I've got some stock, some delphinium right here, Got some snapdragons, some dill that's just starting to germinate. Let's see if I can get it. So the dill is just germinating right there. Our calendula looks great. That's coming up fairly quickly. And then I've got some bachelor button, more calendula, and over here some more delphinium that has not germinated yet. So I will probably leave that humidity dome off. It's kind of warm in here right now. I have to check the temperature, but I've also got, I'd say, fair germination. Even in these where you don't see a lot coming up yet, the seeds have already germinated. So that is one of my second successions. And then back here, this one doesn't have as much germination just yet. Wow, the wind really picked up. But I'll show you guys what that looks like. And some of this is different, some of it's the same. So I've got some forget-me-nots right here, more forget-me-nots, some more craspedia coming up right there. And I found that for what I'm doing, which is not soil blocking, I'm using seed starting trays. Definitely potting mix and not container mix. Potting mix, the algae doesn't seem to take hold in the potting mix like it does with the container mix. So that's something I've learned so far. And then over here, we've got some really tiny eucalyptus starting to germinate. So this is my second succession of plants, and I think I'm going to do one more succession of cool season flowers and foliage, and then I will get started on my warm season fruits and flowers. So aside from what I've got going in these seed starting trays right here, which are on top of the heat mats, I don't have a thermometer on mine, but it just has this low, medium, high setting. So that seems to be working out fine. And then over here, I've got my last succession of, let's see, of tulips, not tulips. I've got my last succession of daffodil bulbs. And so I have planted over 300 bulbs, I think, at this point, and this is the last little bit. That's not a whole lot in the grand scheme of things, but for what we're shooting for, that should get us through spring once those are planted. In the bottom of the greenhouse, under my potting table here, right by my feet, because this greenhouse is not very large at all, I've got my ranunculus going. And again, these are in a mix of potting mix and container gardening soil. So they have come up fairly well. There's still a few that aren't up completely, but like this back container right here seems to have filled out nicely. I've got cherry pie ranunculus, which is a red mix, and this little wash basin right here that's coming up. I am really just sort of setting and forgetting these. I will come in and water them maybe once a week, once every other week, but my goal is to just keep them alive right now. I don't want them to freeze, and I don't want the corms to rot. So I need to make sure I'm not overwatering them, and that's really easy to do in the fall and winter when the water is not evaporating as quickly with the heat of spring and summer. That's what I've got going as far as the cut flowers and foliage that I'm planning to sell and grow for the spring. A couple of other tidbits about what's going on in the greenhouse. This greenhouse is not automatically heated, so I've got just like a little space heater that I'm using in here, and I'm only turning this heater on when it drops to freezing or below freezing outside at night. I'm not worried about it getting too cold in here during the day. At night, I just don't want the seedlings to freeze, and because my seeds are being started on the heat mats, I don't really have to worry about those freezing, but I'm really just trying to keep the seedlings from freezing at night. So that's what my heater's for. And aside from that, I'm not really using anything else in here. These are cool season flowers, so they don't need to be kept warm around the clock. During the day, actually, there's this little vent right here is open, and I typically keep the door to the greenhouse open as well, because here in South Carolina, it can be 32 at like 6 a.m. and 80 degrees by 9 or 10 in the morning. And so unless the temperatures are really dropping, I just like to keep the door and the vent open just for ventilation, and so the plants have really good airflow, and hopefully to prevent a whole lot of like mold or anything undesirable like that starting to grow on the surface of the soil that these seedlings are growing in. Along the lines of succession planting, so here in South Carolina, I'm in the low country of South Carolina. It's very hot, very fast. And so in terms of succession planting cool flowers, I'm not going to be doing, 5 or 6 successions because I don't have that much time. And, the number of successions that you're going to be planting will really depend on where you're located, what your goals are, as far as if you're just growing flowers for enjoyment, or if you're trying to go to market, or if you want to have a pollinator garden. So there are a lot of variables to take into consideration when you're talking about succession planting. But because I have a very quick spring that warms very fast, I don't have enough time for many successions of plants. So I figured 3 should get me through, and hopefully I will have a little bit extra on the tail end. But I know that by May it's hot, so I plan to start sowing my seeds for my warm annuals in January or February, so that I already have transplants to put out in the garden as soon as the weather warms up. With the fertilizer that I used on my seedlings, I've heard it suggested or recommended by some flower growers to use a liquid fertilizer once a week, very low dose, just to help your seedlings along so that they're ready to be planted out when the time comes. I'm gonna see how the granule fertilizer does, and maybe that's just one less thing I have to worry about every week, coming back with liquid fertilizer if I have the granules in there. But if I don't see any growth on these and they're just really slow going because the days are so gray and rainy, then I might switch over to a liquid fertilizer. That's just something I'm sort of testing out right now to see how it goes. Since we're already in the greenhouse, I'm going to show you guys how the citrus that I transplanted is looking compared to a few weeks ago. I do think it's looking a little bit better. I ended up losing the grapefruit completely, but I still have the 5 others that I brought in. So let's take a look at those. They are definitely greening up and don't look as yellow and sad anymore. All right, so here's our Valencia orange right up front. That was never really in bad shape. I just brought it in because it died back so much last winter, and it's putting on some new growth up top. We've got our pink Eureka lemon in the back, and those leaves are definitely starting to get a darker shade of green, and you can really see that variegation now. This Persian lime is probably the tree that I'm seeing the most improvement in. It's got a deeper shade of green in these leaves up here, whereas when I brought it in, everything was sort of looking like this, yellow and washed out. So I think being in pots and citrus specific soil is definitely doing these some good. Let's run out to the garden real quick, and I'm going to show you the progress on just a few of the bulbs we planted, and that'll be it. All right, so just for the purpose of documenting, this is the bed of daffodils that we planted in the last video or two, not too long ago, on the 27th of November. I don't see any sprouts anywhere peeping up through the mulch. So it's my guess that these that are really coming up in the back here are actually irises. And I'm assuming that because another bed that I have planted with irises has started to sort of make its appearance. Oh, I think there might actually, let's see, there might be one daffodil. One daffodil right here starting to come up. But I think that the rest of these are irises. All right, let's walk over and just take a quick look at the bed with the irises that are starting to make an appearance. So here is that iris bed, and as you can see, we've got lots of greenery starting to poke up from the surface of the soil here. These will be spring blooms, and this is just a mix of irises and bearded irises. And these were pretty much all planted or transplanted to this bed around the end of November. And I topped this bed with soiled chicken bedding. So we'll see how that goes. I've got a couple of stray chamomile here that I couldn't get rid of. So we'll see if those bloom. Okay, one more thing, and then it's really the end. I'll show you guys the calendula and the rudbeckia, just so you can see how it comes along through the rest of the winter. Okay, so here is some calendula I actually sowed in the fall, and you can see it's got a little bit of insect damage on it, but I think this will overwinter fine. It's really not that much, just a handful of plants, but if I cut this as I should, calendula will continue to produce flowers. So I don't need 100 of these plants. So I've got these, I have a couple of successions in the greenhouse, and hopefully that'll carry us into the summertime. And then the rest of these are just rudbeckia. I believe this is rudbeckia triloba, and these were actually sown last summer, late in the summer. So we will keep an eye on these through the winter and see how they produce for us in the spring and summertime. Alrighty, you guys, that's it. I hope you enjoyed learning a little bit about what's going on in the greenhouse and why. We will catch up with you guys soon. Bye.